Hi, soil mates. Welcome to part 2 of Unground the World of Coffee. I've got with me Claire Mackenzie. Hi, Claire.
Hi, Richard. Lovely to see you.
Good to see you too. Now, have you ever wanted to listen to a podcast where halfway through the episode, the host falls quite ill, basically passes out and has to crawl out of the room backwards and allows his wife to take over hosting? Because if you have, your dreams are about to come true, because that is exactly what happened on this episode. And for the first half, everything was hunky-dory, and then things went a little bit wrong. But thanks to my wife, Annie, and Claire, they took things over. How was this episode for you, Claire?
Well, I personally was a bit unnerved. I mean, it was going really well. And I can't believe you held it together for half of it. So I'm astounded because you do not sound ill at the beginning. But then suddenly he disappeared from the screen. And as I was in Britain, Richard's in Texas with Annie, and our guest was in Japan.
He just got back from Japan. He was in Sydney, Australia. And my 7-year-old had very kindly brought back some kind of virus from school the day before and kindly passed it on to me, which was awesome. Anyway, it's such a good episode. It gets really geeky really quickly. It goes into a lot of detail. Marcus is a barista who's had an amazing career. His business is called Roots, which is out of Oxford, England, and he's very knowledgeable about how to turn beans into the drink we all enjoy of coffee and all the different ways that you can do that, the different beans that you can source. And he goes into a lot of detail. So if you're not into super geeky coffee chat, probably now is the time to switch off. But I loved it. I thought it was really good. And personally speaking, the second half of the episode, I got to enjoy, listeners, as you are about to enjoy now by listening to it, because I wasn't hosting. But here it is now. All right, so Marcus, do you want to start by telling us who you are and where you fit into the coffee supply chain?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Richard. My name's Marcus. I am a coffee roaster, a business owner, just a general lover of coffee, and currently I own a coffee roaster that's based out of the UK, England. I used to own a shop in Sydney. So my travels and kind of the community that I fell into through coffee has led me to make a lot of connections, wonderful connections. It even led me to meeting my partner. That has taken me across the globe. So I've traveled a lot recently. I just got back from Japan, and last year I was in Lisbon. The new sort of focal point is the specialty coffee, like high quality coffee. And I guess under that umbrella comes regenerative coffee.
Yeah.
I think specialty coffee is thrown around a lot, and I think it's a term that's used too often. So our focus is really on how do we find the end consumer ourselves, as opposed to wholesale is absolutely a huge part of our business, but we're really focusing on niching down, not selling as much coffee, but selling a higher quality, better quality, regenerative type of coffee. And my introduction into regenerative was, although I've known a lot about it over the last 10, 15 years, my introduction to it was last year through Galley. I traveled to Costa Rica. I saw a lot of the farming practices. I saw a lot of farms, and I saw a lot of the hard work that goes into producing a cup of coffee.
Was it different to what you expected?
I had a lot of previous insight, and I'd been to farms in Australia, farms in Indonesia, but I'd never been to such an area like Costa Rica, where the economy is kind of surrounded by coffee.
Yeah.
And the livelihoods of the nation is surrounded by coffee, essentially. I think the most eye-opening factor to me was just how hard it is to produce coffee.
Yeah. And I mean, how do you even go about finding that? How do you discover who to talk to in Costa Rica and why Costa Rica? Like, tell us a bit more about your process of trying to bring the best coffee to your customers through your Roots coffee business.
I guess I need to take a step back, and this might sound a little woo-woo, but like my journey into coffee, right? Taste was always king. I got into coffee at a young age, around university time, which may not be that young for some people now. I know that there's a lot of teenagers having coffee, but for me, I cared deeply about my health, my prosperity, my wellness, everything I put in my body, I cared about and I wanted to know about. So as I started having coffee, I had no idea, but I started to realize, this coffee tastes different to this one, and this one's different again. And that was just along the milk journey. like lattes, mochaccino's, cappuccinos. And then I got progressively smaller coffees. I was having piccolos then and macchiatos. And then I started drinking black coffees. And I noticed that you could really taste the nuances of each origin. I guess as time went on, with your sensory experience, you have a taste memory. And I wanted to push the boundaries of what I was drinking. I wanted to create a unique experience every time, which unfortunately it led me to, not unfortunately, I should say fortunately, it led me to trips around the world. I went to Europe, Japan, Americas. I landed up in Portland. I landed at this place called Alliance for Coffee Excellence. That's where they roast and they taste Cup of Excellence coffee. And this just all blew my mind because I wondered how individuals, they wake up and at first, it's like stimulant first, experience second, which was just totally mind-boggling to me that somebody can have consume this good for their entire lives and not even care to think about what they're actually drinking or tasting. So when I reached, I think, like the highest height of taste, I then started to question like, how are they producing it? What sort of processing is involved? What are the farms like? What are the practices like? Are the farmers, do they get paid properly? I started to question more of the supply chain, and that led me to, I guess, an appreciation of how hard it is for farmers. And also it led me to open my eyes a little bit on how difficult it is for just the industry itself in producing a cup of coffee for individuals that drink milk. They rush through coffee as like an automatic part of their day. How can we tap into making it a thoughtful experience for individuals and find them and get them to start appreciating a better quality, more thoughtful approach about coffee? Because I don't want to be right. I have been feeding the masses of Sydney and of Europe for some time now, and I'm not over it. I do appreciate that because to connect with people, I have to educate them. So I understand it's a process. And I absolutely did that at the Sydney shop I had people coming in drinking large flat whites, large cappuccinos with 2 sugars, and I got them down to drinking long blacks, which gave me so much joy that I could share and have them appreciate with me the passion that I have involved in coffee, and they could actually taste the nuances of the origin at heart in each coffee bean. So sorry for that woo-woo bit of information there. But all in all, I guess green coffee as a commodity is going through the roof, and I need consumers to see it still costs less than a bottle of water for someone to buy regenerative coffee and make it at home. A $30 bag of coffee, I think if you do the numbers at 250 grams, it works out to be about 17 serves per bag. And then the cost of that is under $2. So it's still very fair. And I think it's still achievable that people start to appreciate and just enjoy the experience and be a little bit more thoughtful every day about what they put in their body. And I'm not sure if I've answered your question. Hello.
I'm Annie. Rich is my husband. He's not feeling well. He's just had to walk away. He's just feeling quite faint. So he's just stepped away, but he's listening and he's really enjoying where this is going. I'm just wondering if we can keep you talking a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I can talk all day about coffee somehow. I'm obviously very passionate. And
So when we spoke to Gally and Heather Terry, I just think it's a really basic thing that listeners don't know about, and I personally don't know enough about it, that when we get coffee, we just see it as this black thing, which has been, normally over roasted. Can you kind of just break that down for us? And maybe could you liken your brand? Can you try and describe what we're going to see and taste and smell compared to a big brand?
Coffee essentially comes from a plant, and it comes as a cherry. And most cherries, not all, but most, have 2 beans inside wrapped around mucilage. And so when farmers harvest the cherries and they think about what types of processing they're going to do to the coffee, they'll either leave the mucilage slightly on, take it off completely, or leave it on entirely. And that determines how they process the coffee. And then arguably, some say it's true, others say it's not, coffee goes through a natural fermentation. And this fermentation definitely affects the flavor, the end cup that we get from a coffee. You've either got a natural processing where they leave the mucilage on, and that gives like intrinsic fruitier notes to the coffee. Otherwise, you have when they wash the mucilage, that's like a lot cleaner tasting notes. You still obviously have the fruitiness, but it's a little bit cleaner, crisper. That's where I feel like you taste the inherent qualities of the soil, and you're tasting like the surrounding terroir, like you've got altitude at play here. This is where a good coffee really shines and cuts through. Like somebody that has a farm that's at incredible elevation and difficult to pick may want to wash their coffees because it's got so many unique nuances and flavor, like intrinsic flavors about it. And going on with what was just said about large brands of coffee, a lot of consumers put milk in their coffee, and milk itself is a huge masking agent. And there's definitely there's thousands of types of milk, and this all affects how it cuts with coffee. So ultimately when they used to order a large cap or large flat white, very milky, heavy drinks, I used to wonder, how do you even know what the coffee's tasting like? You're essentially just tasting a huge cup of milk with a breath of coffee in there. I could serve any coffee right now and you'd be satisfied because of the volume of milk you're getting. That hurt me because I am passionate about making coffees. And I guess it's like looking at a scotch. If you're a scotch drinker, you don't put the best scotch with Coca-Cola. You have it neat. You taste the scotch for what it is and you appreciate everything about that scotch. But once you add soda or Coke with it, it just destroys the scotch. Well, I believe it does. And so as I started to have more black coffees in, I started to realize I don't need to serve such high quality with milk. I can get a lower grade of coffee to serve with milk. And then later it was occurring to me, now I'm just in a capitalist market society. I'm just here trying to make money. Why am I doing it? I thought, I've got these beautiful single origins. So when they say single origin, they mean it comes from a single farm. That's a whole nother conversation in itself. But basically it means that there's a farm in Costa Rica in a region, and it kind of specifically means it's coming from that region and only that region. It's blends that make up milk coffees. So they may blend from Colombia, Brazil, and Ethiopia, and that will make up the coffee. And I still think to myself, what are roasters pushing when they're saying we've got this unique blend, this chocolatey, fruity blend with all these origins in it? I'm like, how is any consumer going to know or care or taste what origin in it when they're having a lot of milk in that cup of coffee? They're not going to know. There's so much smoke and mirrors in this industry. It's truly, truly amazing. There's a lot of good, but there's a lot of smoke and mirrors. And when I started to feel those painful thoughts on I'm just a part of a capitalist, I'm part of this marketing world of coffee, I did end up selling my shop and I headed to the UK because the UK is a much larger market than Australia. But unfortunately, what I didn't realize back then is that the UK is quite behind Australia. We actually drink and appreciate, I want to say this loosely to the listeners, we do have a better culture of coffee in Australia than the UK. However, the UK it's climbing, it's growing, and it is becoming very good. And I am part of the UK, so I'd like to say that it is improving. But an improvement to me in the industry is more and more people drinking a single origin coffee. I've been at the London Coffee Festival the last few years in a row with Roots, and we haven't served a single milk coffee at the festival, which just goes to show how it is growing, how more consumers are appreciating a better quality coffee, and they've got more intelligent palates and they're discerning on what they're actually drinking. They're more critical. I guess it's that taste memory that we develop when we start to care about something. You can't draw a taste memory back. You can't go back in time and have something that's a little bit worse than what you've since had, because you'll just be disgusted by it, which is unfortunate. It'd be great if we could lower our standards sometimes, but not all the time. And at the London Coffee Festival, that has shown to me that we can absolutely head towards regenerative coffee, which is where we are heading now. And the other difficulty in this is that taste being king, people start needing to appreciate the regenerative side or purpose behind production. And they need to somehow associate good taste bud vibes with that thought alone, because regenerative coffee doesn't necessarily mean that it will always be a fantastic cup of coffee. Largely, it is a fantastic cup of coffee, but coffee it's so objective to people. Yes, I understand it is better and it tastes better, but to the objective punter who's had milk coffees their whole life, getting them to switch straight away, it takes a little bit of a process. But right now for us, it's about getting awareness. So we just did a pop-up in Japan, in Tokyo, and I wish the worldwide market was like Japan. They love specialty coffee. They love quality coffee. So let me explain to you how a typical shop works. US, in the UK, America, Australia, you have an espresso machine and you make espresso-based drinks. So over there, we just stood at the brew bar making pour-over coffee. So they had their espresso, but we made over 100 pour-overs in a few hours to the Japanese market, and they're paying about $11 to $12 per cup of coffee. They weren't thinking twice. They weren't blinking about it. They appreciated craft and they appreciate high quality over there. And so we also did one last year in Lisbon. And in Lisbon, it was quite the opposite. We were making espresso-based coffees, a lot of milk drinks. We had, in that scenario, we made a batch brewer, which is like a filter coffee, but a larger quantity, so you can get multiple cups from it, as opposed to Japan, where we were individually pouring one coffee per single consumer. And the difference to me was just quite clear that, like, maybe we need to market all our coffees to the Japanese market, to the Korean market, to the Chinese market, to the Taiwanese market. Milk is not ingrained in their culture. They don't necessarily straight away shoot for the convenience of a milky-based drink. I'm not here to talk about milk, but more and more society is moving away from milk, but they've found other alternatives. They've found plant-based milk alternatives, which arguably, there's a lot of oils and ridiculous substances that come out of those milks. I wish people could just have a simple coffee and water, how it was meant to be, how you can actually taste what you're drinking.
Marcus, can I ask you, for our listener, I just want to, you talk about regenerative. What do you, in your terms, what is regenerative? And is it regenerative with organic, i.e. no chemicals at all? Because remember, regenerative doesn't have a single certification. How are you identifying with that, and how are you explaining that to a customer?
My journey into the explanation of regenerative is still underway, but I look at it as like a diversity in the ecosystem. I look at it as a stronger ecosystem of plants and wildlife, insects, and a deeper root system for, I guess, nurturing. And it goes a little bit beyond sustainability for me. In the term itself, it's actually regenerating itself. And I saw this firsthand in Costa Rica. They have different plants, different trees there to cover, and there's growth on the ground so it absorbs moisture, and it can detract from when the sun's beaming down on it. It can hold all the moisture in there, and I guess it's all around better farming practices. And like, one thing about regeneration is, like, there is a clear concern for the farmer. We absolutely want to find a more suitable wage structure and have these individuals paid appropriately to everything they're doing. And I think in the agrochemical world, there's just a focus on production output, and regenerative world's not so concerned immediately with output. It's about the land and it's about the soil. To explain that to someone, as opposed to say there's chemicals in your current cup of coffee, immediately you'd be like, what do you mean? Are you saying this is just a pure cup of coffee? I've got other nasties in here, as opposed to a regenerative cup of coffee. Anybody would make the switch. It's not that easy to communicate that value to a lot of people. To individuals, sure, I can do it.
So how does regenerative soil, nutrient-dense soil, directly impact the taste of the coffee, the flavor of the coffee? Can you draw that correlation to a customer?
Yeah, it's all about the diversity of the soil and the land. That adds to the intricate flavors of, in a nutshell, of a coffee plant. And adding altitude to that, you get flavors, you get the most unique flavors. You can taste, I can't remember what the plant is called, but there's a tree that produces a fruit similar to like a mandarin. And like over there, when you have that coffee, you can taste a little bit of that mandarin in the coffee. All these large companies spitting out tons of coffee. It's like tobacco cereal. Nespresso has that on their packaging as a tasting note for coffee. Why do I like cereal? That's not a tasting note. I'm sorry to say, but like, you want fruity notes, floral notes, cacao notes, nuttier notes, and nothing along the lines of tobacco. I describe it as like, why do you want to wake up every day and lick a car tire and chew on a smoked cigarette? Why do you want to do that when you're going to have something that's actually desirable and tasty and fruity? I remember at Cup of Excellence, the coffee I tasted was mind-blowing, and I still remember that moment. It was kind of like butter and cinnamon and raisins in a cup of coffee. It was like I was in a cold environment. Someone gave me a warm piece of bread, just a little bit toasted, had butter on it, had cinnamon on it, and raisins. And I just thought, I'm drinking this. It's totally amazing. And that brings me to, like, I think it's the French novelist Marcel Proust. He, in his writing piece, In Search of Lost Time, he talks about how he had there's a Madeleine cake, and he dips it into his tea. And he brings back childhood memories. And I think that's what coffee does for me. That's what each cup does for me. And like, I've traveled a lot for coffee, and I still have the memories of these flavors, and like great memories. And like, even if they're like, they may associate me to something else I did in that city or my whereabouts, but I still can remember the cup of coffee I drank. And that's like, my search just continues. I'm always looking for a better cup of coffee. Like, I'm here for the fight of regenerative coffee. But if each individual can start to improve the quality of their palate, improve their taste memory, that is one step which will lead to them experiencing regenerative coffee, because I think they'll go down a similar pathway that I did, where I then questioned the supply chain. So how to get that coffee? You could just find find a lot of specialty shops and try all you can do is try coffee, and then create like a memory bank on what you've had until you finally get to a coffee that's better. Buy different coffees and then get to a better coffee. And then from that, I'm hoping that you will start to question or be curious about the supply chain and what you're actually drinking and why you're drinking it. Instead of like having coffee as like in the morning as a convenient stimulant firsthand, just be a little bit more thoughtful with the experience. Like, take time and make it a ritual. If everybody could, like, you had your beautiful regenerative piece of meat last night, and I'm sure you took a moment to appreciate every bite of that piece of your dinner. You didn't just huff it down. If we could use that automatic part of our day, which is coffee, and be a little bit more thoughtful about it, then that will lead ideally to an interest in the supply chain, and then people will come up to regenerative coffee. I just don't see how we can't get there. Certain companies that I choose to drink, I know that they are doing the right thing. I know that these farms don't necessarily have a label of regenerative on them, but I know that they're doing everything that would be true to regenerative coffee. Fortunately, there's a lot of generations coming through the ranks that are changing the process of the farms and doing the right thing. It's very difficult. And there's like, even I'm thinking about when you're at a supermarket, you're just confronted with so much choice. Like, choice is a commodity that they're trying to sell to, and they've done so good at it. They market so well for it. There's all these bags of coffee on the shelf, and thinking, that looks good. That's kind of sparkly and it's got a star on it. Oh, but this one's like very tidy and minimalist. And you're thinking like, what's going on here? How do I decide? And unfortunately, you don't know. You'll only know if you try. There are certain qualities I'd look for. I'd look for a story about something about the farmer as a focal point is good, as opposed to just origin. And traceability is good. Also, when it was harvested. And personally, I wouldn't buy coffee from the supermarket. I'd buy from a smaller local store, because that smaller local store is more likely to push the lines of regenerative before a mass supermarket is.
Now time for a quick listener question. Juliet Blackshaw from Norfolk, England.
Hey, Rich. Hey, everyone. Really loving your podcast. I wanted to ask the experts about the best way to brew the perfect at-home cup of coffee. We don't have a coffee machine, preferring to use instead the old-fashioned cafetiere, but these break a lot and my husband is very upset with them. So I just wondered which ones the experts use at home, and if there are anything new on the market that might be worth investing in.
Before we get to the answer, we'll be right back. Take it away, Tilly.
6 inches of soil is made possible by...
Fielden is the English whiskey that's changing farming for the better. Field by field, harvest by harvest. Fielden is bringing England's fields back to life with diverse grains that thrive naturally. No sprays, no artificial fertilisers, no shortcuts. It's no chem, regen. Regenerative farming without chemicals. The result? Healthy soils, clean waters, flourishing biodiversity, a smaller carbon footprint, and whiskey full of flavour. Think warm, flaky pastry, butter and caramel. Fields full of life, whiskey full of flavour. Visit fielden.com, Fielden, and remember to drink responsibly.
Back to you, Daddy.
Great question. I love this question. I think the most important thing aside from the beans that they're drinking is the grinder. Nowadays, they make really good quality hand grinders. This might seem ridiculous, right? There's a hand grinder called a Comandante, or there's a Time More, and they're roughly about 100 pounds, which is expensive, but that will last a lifetime, and like an actual lifetime. So if you purchase this, then you've got your hand grinder. Then you can focus on the quality of beans. And I personally wouldn't use that method of brewing coffee. I'm glad you said it breaks because you may want to move away from it. Simply, this might sound a bit outrageous, but all I would do is if you've got 15 grams of coffee, I'll grind my 15 grams of coffee to a relatively coarse level of coffee. And I would just put that in a vessel and I would add a ratio of 1 to 15 grams of water. So I think that is, for 15 grams, that's 225 grams of water. And I would just let it steep like a cup of tea. And then after that, I would pour it out, I would sift it out. I would make sure I get rid of the coffee grounds to just have a nice filtered cup of coffee. Now, that might seem simple, stupid, because it is. Like, we are drinking coffee. It doesn't need much done to it other than a little bit of agitation, which comes from the heat and the pouring of the water. And that's it. It should just steep. If you have a quality coffee, you will taste the characteristics of it that way. All these fancy pouring techniques and like the whole side of consumerism with coffee products is another thing. And I don't like it. It should be very simple. Keep it simple. Purchase a good hand grinder and you're set for life. And then you can focus on quality of beans. So in a nutshell, 15 grams of coffee, 225 grams of water, pour it into a vessel, give it a couple of stirs, about 94 to 96 degrees. So that might mean you need to get a temperature sensitive kettle, which aren't too expensive and well worth the investment. And then let it steep for a couple of minutes and sift it out.
I love it. Old school.
Yeah, it is old school. I mean, even when we taste coffee, it's called cupping coffee. What we do is we have coffee grounds in a cup. We pour water in it and we get a spoon and we spoon through the coffee to stir it, to agitate and stir it through. The coffee sinks to the bottom and then we literally take a sip from that cup. And that's how we're tasting the coffee. That's why I'm so confused how we've gone to all these elaborate brew methods, when if we're tasting coffee like this, shouldn't we kind of replicate this for how we drink coffee?
You mentioned the pour overs in Japan. Do you like that method as well?
I absolutely love it. I love every method of coffee, but I could have done, like, if you had given me a couple of empty vessels, I would have been happy with that immersion method that I just described to you. And look, it looks cool, right? Doesn't it? You got fancy aerated filters and like some are a little bit jagged because that's supposed to that allows more oxygen to come through the brewing, which it does, but I don't find it necessary.
Got it. Okay, you ready? Question 2 from a listener.
Hello, I've got a question about recommendations for UK-based online retailers of coffee beans. Like everyone, I'm interested in getting the best flavour, but I'm also interested in the environmental impact and the impact on the local community where the beans are grown. If you've got any recommendations, that'd be great to hear. But also, if you've got any recommendations for standards to keep an eye out for or description in the beans sale that might help us, that'd be great. Thank you.
You know what? One of the charms about coffee, to me, even having a coffee company, is trialing various coffees from around the world, trialing different coffees. I think this gentleman should explore a multi-roasting or a multi-roaster outlook. And the comments I mentioned before, having a look for traceability on information on farmers is very important. I definitely think the processing of coffee, like experimental processes, that to me suggests that the farm is innovative and new, which is often a good thing because they're like, if they can focus on the processing, they don't have a facility where they're like using archaic processing methods, which may be for the mass production. They're trialing newer, different processing, and they may have a smaller lot of single origin. I think his community impact, he should every now and then get out to his local store and support that community.
The community impact on the local communities, anything specific?
Yeah. I just needed to add that in because I think like we need to support our local to get anywhere, right? This whole conversation has been about supporting our local baristas and local coffee shops to be able to lead towards regenerative. Or the next person coming in there and saying, hey, if he goes in there and asks that question, that gets the ball rolling, even if that cafe doesn't have anything that they can supply him or don't have any answers, right? He should be on the front foot of challenging coffee shops for regenerative and sustainable processes of coffee. Like, all I know is that I care about the individuals producing these great cups of coffee, and I care for their livelihoods. And I can only say, for him to be able to support that community, to do it, to travel out to Origin and do a tour. You know, I want to put it like, but his eyes, he may be thinking, I've just got to purchase a coffee, or the only way I can contribute is by purchasing this coffee bag. And I understand that too. I reckon trialing a multi-roaster approach until he lands on the one he really likes, or the one he believes in is doing a good thing. And let's hope that it's not smoke and mirrors when he finds that one that's doing a good thing.
I'm afraid I don't know what these questions are until I hit play. There is a final question, so I can't tee it up, but shall I just go for it and see? Let's see what's here, shall we? Let's see.
Has anyone ever tried roasting coffee beans over wood or charcoal? And if so, what flavour might that impart onto the coffee beans? Would it make a big difference in the grand scheme of other roasting methods?
Yeah, absolutely. There are wood roasters, so that's not uncommon. It was probably, I think the wood roasters would have been the first roasters around. As for flavour characteristics, I can't actually speak to whether there is a nuance from wood roasting. And that's largely because the wood roasters I know are just mass producers, and they haven't really produced anything that is up to quality for me to drink. I'm sounding like a real snob, but that is the case. And I guess a lot of people nowadays are moving towards more economically and sustainable roasting methods. I haven't heard of an innovative wood roaster that's out there that's actually like really sustainable for the environment. Yeah, I don't think people like the modern roasters are using wood roasters. So I'm sorry, I cannot give you an answer on that one. That is my final thought.
Interesting question. I have a question about roots. Earlier, before Rich started recording, you were speaking about starting something up in San Francisco. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. So there's an appetite because both our partners are also so one of my partner in the Roots, his partner is actually from San Francisco, and my partner also has a lot of work in San Francisco. So we spend a lot of time there, and we have noticed that there's a great thing that's happened with the tech ecosystem. These individuals all have a passion outside of their work. And where do they spend a lot of their time? In the coffee industry, being passionate about something other than work. And with that comes a great opportunity, because Americans typically drink a lot of black coffees already. They're not like the UK and Australia that are very milk-dominated cultures of coffee drinking. So there's an appreciation for filter and espresso-based coffees, like just single espresso black coffees already. And we would really like to be over there.
You haven't been to Texas, have you?
What's that?
You've been to Texas.
I actually used to live in
Did
Texas.
you?
I used to live in Austin.
Okay.
Yeah, I did. And so I think, so down there you have Proud Mary's. That's an Australian coffee. They're in America now, but I would go there for a cup of coffee. That guy, he is a leader in the industry. He is very innovative, entrepreneurial, and he does great work with farmers. He actually invests in the farm producing his coffee. He invests money to get machinery. He invests in their processing. That is one coffee that I would recommend to individuals to take a look at, Proud Mary's coffee. And the good thing about him is that even if they make a commitment to the farmers, right? So even if that farmer produces a crop that may not be as exceptional as the last crop, they still have made a commitment to that farm. And so they will support them through selling that coffee still, which I think is unbelievable. I would love to be at that stage for Roots.
Thank you for mentioning that. I was just going to say, that's not far from me either. I don't know why I don't spend more time there. But we have seen just this rise in milk is obviously a big deal, but sugar, it's just sugar. It's just different ways to get a lot of sugar into the coffees, a lot of syrups, a lot of the sugars.
Yeah. And I say that's only for, like, again, the quality, like the diversity of the soil and the ecosystem, the birds, the plants, the trees, the insects, if everything's like untouched by synthetic mass chemicals, then you'll get a larger depth of flavor out of the coffee. You'll get more nuances out of the coffee. And I don't think you'd want to add sugar. It's just another masking agent to what is probably a terrible coffee. Yeah, I've really had my time with terrible coffees. I get super frustrated. I get frustrated at individuals that drink a coffee every day and do not question what they're drinking, or just have a moment to be a little bit more thoughtful about what it is they're drinking and why they're drinking it. But I guess you could say that for everything in life.
Likewise. You absolutely, when Rich and I have time to go out, we usually go to like this Ethiopian restaurant that we love, and they always do their coffee ritual, and then it's just having gratitude for, well, like you said, everything in front of you, but specifically around this ritual of coffee, where you actually pause, take a moment, and be one with what's happening in front of you. But I love that.
Yeah.
But I just want to go back for our listeners for just a sweet little nugget from you in terms of your next venture with Roots. What is your hope for someone who happens upon Roots and comes inside? What do you want them to think, feel, and then do when they leave?
I guess first and foremost, I want them to have an incredible tasting journey. I want them to experience something that they didn't believe coffee could taste like. I hope that they can associate us as individuals that are passionate and care deeply enough for the whole supply chain, that we actually work with farmers, and that we want to develop the livelihood of farmers, and that we are working towards a regenerative, sustainable business operation where we actually connect with each consumer individually, and we'll have a chat about what we've got upcoming, future processes, and just knowing that they are committed, we are committed to a great tasting cup of coffee that is nuanced with the right supply chain and the right relationships.
So tell me your whereabouts right now.
I'm in Sydney now, but I'll be going back to San Francisco and then going back to the UK.
So we should come and give you a visit for sure. So thank you very much for being here, Marcus.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Well, Claire, what an episode. That was deeply interesting to me. What did you think about it all?
Well, I think I've really admitted to you that your coffee knowledge is far more superior. I think that you have been enjoying, as Annie showed far more knowledge than me, the ins and outs of the coffee industry and perhaps some of the ceremony. What it's left me with is become much keener to explore further where coffee is from. When I pick up a packet, trying to understand the dates of roasting, how it's roasted, and then I've been treating it a bit more like wine, opening the packet, smelling it, brewing it more slowly, and definitely drinking it more slowly. So if I am going to spend that more, which I obviously would appreciate because I want that money to go to the growers and try to find the products that are doing that, then I want to treat it more like a luxury good. So I am trying to not just inhale it because it's going to make me buzz all day. I'm trying to go, wow, and try what he said is make it fun, pull out the differences in flavors and tastes and sensations. And I have never done that before. I mean, I've said this is a good cup of coffee, but not the why, where, how sort of thing. And how about you? What did you think?
Well, I think it's a deeply interesting world, way more complex than I'd ever really thought about before. It also reminds me of when I was 21 years old. I was in my first ever job, fresh out of university studying agriculture, and I worked for a cheese company up in the Northeast. And on about day 2 of my employment, they had the head buyer of Tesco's, the head cheese buyer of Tesco's coming to visit, the big cheese, if you like. And they'd got the boardroom all set up. And my job as the fresh new graduate was to make them some coffee. And I had zero experience of doing this. And I just, I guess, assumed that all coffee was instant coffee. So I made this big pot of coffee with no filter paper or anything in it. And this very important guest came in and I poured everybody their coffees like a good graduate. And the meeting got underway and I noticed everyone started to pick stuff out of their teeth as they were drinking their coffee. And I was like, oh God. And then the MD of the company stood up and said, Richard, I think you've made a bit of a mistake with the coffee. Let's rebrew it. And so I've been on a personal journey from that as the starting point to now chatting to someone like Marcus was a pretty big transformation personally. But yeah, I loved it. I thought the level of detail and thoughtfulness in having a cup of of coffee is definitely something that I've taken into my own life. I was lucky enough to actually go meet up with Galley at this specialty coffee expo in Houston, Texas, a couple of weeks ago, where basically all of the Galleys of the world and all of the Marcuses all come to this one place. And it was just such an interesting world to be a part of. And I will also just quickly add that on the back of this episode, Marcus had recommended a coffee shop here in Austin, Texas called Proud Mary's. And I went there this week with some of Galley's beans and my noise cancelling headphones. And I met up with Nolan, who's the owner, and I made him sit down and listen to Galley's soil sound effect meditation whilst trying Galley's coffee beans for the first time. And I'll post it on our socials. But it was really interesting because it took him, this guy who's spent a career in coffee, to like the next level of appreciation of how important soil is to coffee, as he was able to listen to it whilst drinking. So that was pretty cool. So yeah.
Your coffee journey is definitely becoming very, you're going to become an aficionado. They'll be interviewing you soon. So this is great to hear. My experience this week has been less on coffee. Well, we did have coffee. We drank quite a lot of coffee, but I was getting more involved in the soil and soil testing. I'm doing a regenerative farming course at Hembant in Wales.
Wow.
So every time I do these podcasts now, I'm trying to relate more to what everybody is talking about and learning and pulling my learnings together. 5 years. It was pretty phenomenal for 4 days to be away from the family, which is obviously sad, but wonderful for me to be cooked for by an amazing person. It was all to do with fresh food off the farm, but we really did get quite involved in looking, smelling, tasting, reading, looking at, and tech side as well of soil. And I will be doing more and more of that. So I'm hoping to be able to share more of that as we go on, Rich.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Soil Mates, we'll definitely be bringing more of those experiences to our podcast as we explore guests for future episodes. But thank you so much for listening today. More episodes to follow really soon. We really appreciate you. See you soon.
Just like to do a very special thank you to Marcus from Roots Coffee for sending me a sample of 2 of his bags of coffee, which were absolutely delicious. They were single blend. One was from Ethiopia. I brewed it accordingly, as he said. I measured it out. I think I did it with an AeroPress because he said that was okay. He wasn't recommending using our espresso little pot that we put on the top of the stove. So I did that, and I usually have really milky coffee. Decided not to do that as suggested, and either had it black or with a tiny bit of milk so I could enjoy the flavours. It's definitely a different experience for me and took a bit of getting used to because I'm so used to the milky latte. But all I really want to say to Marcus, it was fabulous, lovely packaging, delicious, lots of great information, and I can't wait to drink it again. I'm hoping that he's going to be at Groundswell. But I really recommend it. You can order online through Roots. It was really delicious, and I really enjoyed the experience of knowing that the coffee had been brilliantly sourced, farmers were being paid properly, the processes and the growing was green, no chemicals used in the coffee process, and roasted perfectly, so nothing was ruined, nothing was destroyed. Probably better for me as well, nutritionally. I have no idea about that. We didn't discuss that, but personally it was fantastic, and I really just want to thank Marcus for very generously sending me 2 beautiful bags of coffee. Thank you.